Hey, man, welcome to the house. Happy Halloween.
Oh, thank you.
How are you?
I'm ready for a scary interview.
I look forward to it. Man, your show, I'm sure you get this all the time, the impact it had on people, but specifically to me, I think I look now at my artistic choices today and I can point them directly back to your program and the Hilarious House of Frightenstein and how incredible it was. So just personally, thank you for making that show with you and Billy.
Oh, you're welcome. It sounds like you're really talking from your heart. This is not something you're reading off a teleprompter behind me.
There's no teleprompter. There's no bullshit here, man. When you think about the legacy of that program, what do you think?
I'm shocked, to tell you the truth. My brother and I produced the show together. And to be quite frank with you, we thought we were going to produce 130 hour-long episodes for CHCH-TV in Hamilton. And it would run a year and then die and go to television heaven. But it just didn't work out that way. The show was syndicated across Canada, as I'm sure you know. And then it was syndicated across the U.S., and then it just kept on going and going. It's somewhat like Rocky Horror Show. You know, they didn't plan on being around for half a century either.
Right, that's true.
Shows can outlive me, that's for sure. So, shock, I guess, when you put those two words together.
When you go
legacy
to
and, you know.
For people who don't know how it started, your best way, tell me about how this began.
Sure. My brother had a history at CHCH-TV in Hamilton, which is a small, well, not so small anymore, but it was a small community, sort of 50 minutes out of Toronto. Yeah. He had produced about 1 million episodes of Ed Allen. It was an exercise show way back when. He had a show called Party Game there, a charade show. He had a history. And he was considered the sort of golden hair boy at the station, could do no wrong.
Right.
Whereas the staff guys, all they could do was wrong. So anything he wanted to do, he could do. We looked at their schedule and realized that, or we thought anyway, that they had a hole in their afternoon children's programming. They had a couple of children's shows. They had a guy named Captain Andy who did a half-hour show. Yeah. Not much Shazam there. Yeah. And they had Tiny Talent Time, which was by and large for adults to look at the cute little kids singing and dancing.
My grandfather always wanted me to be on that show as a piano player, always.
Well, that would have sent your career flying at the age of 5, if it hadn't already been flying by the age of 5, and I think it probably has.
I don't know about that.
You're the grand old man of Canadian entertainment.
I know. God, how'd to get old, but I'm okay with it.
I think you were probably born the grand old man of Canadian entertainment.
I didn't even know that if you were in Canada, you could make this sort of thing. And then I saw you guys in FCTV, and I thought, because, growing up in Toronto, you get a lot of American influence, and to a degree, a lot of British influence.
Yeah.
And I had never really connected to the fact that you could make Canadian TV. I'd only seen Hockey Night in Canada and the news. And then I saw
you can make it. The only problem is nobody's going to watch it.
Nobody's going to watch it. Yeah, true. Yeah. So your brother's the golden boy.
Okay,
and,
we went in to see the station manager, guy named Sid Bibby, who was a real sort of salt-of-the-earth kind of mainstream guy. We pitched him on the idea of a pseudo-horror kids' TV show because there was nothing like that in this market, nothing like that in this country at that time. Still isn't anything like that.
No.
Anyway, we spent about 40 minutes in the office with Sid and pitched our little guts out. And at the end of it, he just said, well, guys, let me think about that. So we walked out of that room. Clearly, we had not made a sale. There was no handshake there. So came back to Toronto, thought about it for a bit, made another appointment, went back in, and my brother, again, who's 7 years older than me, still is actually, so he did most of the talking in that meeting since I was 12. No, I'm kidding, I was about 24. And said to Sid, how about if we could get you a real big-time Hollywood movie star to be the host of the show, a horror-oriented movie star? Mm-hmm. And Sid, being the kind of grounded guy that he was, said, like who? So Riff just sort of looked up into the air and reached up and pulled down a name just from nowhere and said, well, I don't know, how about Vincent Price? And Sid's head spun around about 3 times like he was the star of The Exorcist. And said, listen, if you could get Vincent Price to come to our little town in Hamilton here and do our kids' show, I'd sign right here, right now, for 130 hour-long episodes. Right. And we just happened to have a contract in our back pocket, and he signed it.
You made a contract up in anticipation of this?
Yeah, so that was the good news. The bad news is we realized as soon as we left the building, how the F are we going to get Vincent Price? How are we even going to find Vincent Price?
Yeah, you didn't know him.
No, nothing. Nothing. Just pulled it out of the air. So, to speed this story up a little bit, while we were shooting Frightenstein, we thought we'd just go for the full Monty and perhaps do an animated version, which is, again, what I'm thinking about now, almost half a century later, as well as the reboot, talking about an animated version. So we got in touch with a friend of ours, a guy named Al Guest, who was in the animation business, and he was busy. He had just started his own series, an animated series called Rocket Robin Hood.
Of course, I remember that.
Yeah, and he put us in contact with Forey Ackerman, who was the publisher of the most famous horror magazine of its day, Famous Monsters. And we met with Forey in Los Angeles, and he sold us the rights to a bunch of black and white stills. If you remember the show, whenever we had 3 seconds to spare, we would just pop in a scary still.
Yeah, I wondered where that came from.
Licensed by him.
Right.
And he was the sort of main man in horror at the time. He also knew Vincent Price and said that he would make an introduction. So he did. And again, to make a long story shorter, I don't know how to make them short, but shorter, we got in touch with Vincent and told him what we were doing. And we said that we're shooting a children's show. He'd never done one before. It was long before Michael Jackson was born, let alone into his Thriller days.
So is this like the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, early 70s. 70, actually, is when it was. And so we'd never done a kid show before. We said we're doing it in a small town just outside of Hamilton for a station called CHCH. Nobody watches CHCH. There's nobody in that town, and their antenna's about 20 feet high. Yeah. So we can pretty well guarantee you, regardless of how bad a job we do, nobody's going to see it. So it's not going to screw up your career in the film industry, because he was quite famous at the time.
Yes.
So that was the second point. We said that we would pay him, which was a big plus. Now, it wasn't a whole lot of dough. It was like $10,000. But back in 1970, $10,000 was probably closer to, I don't know, a couple $100,000 today.
And where'd you get the $10,000 from? The budget?
The air.
The air, you just found it?
There was no budget yet. Yeah. This was not a big-time production like you're used to.
You're in my house right now.
But you're actually planning ahead. I got the call from you like 4 weeks ago or something. This was all out of the air. And at that time, the air was really the air. It wasn't some kind of a computer term.
Right.
So we said, and the last point, and this was the one that really clinched the deal, was we said we'll get you in and out of town in 2 days. We'll do all your stuff in 2 days. Now, it didn't exactly work out that way, but that was the deal we shook hands on. And Vincent Price said yes.
That's incredible.
Which was quite incredible.
Aside from the money in the 2 days, do you think, was he really intrigued by what it is you were trying to do? Creating young horror fans, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. He definitely didn't need the dough.
Yeah.
He didn't need the money. No, he did it because it was for kids, and like I said, it was a new thing for him. And the timing was perfect for him, because we were shooting something in L.A. at the time. So if we could book him in like on a weekend or something, he wouldn't even have to miss a shooting day. Right. By the way, my last thought was, and Vincent Price said yes. When we were talking, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you had asked me before, the word is out, I guess, that we're at the very early stages of working on a documentary about the show.
Right.
Because the show inspired the who's who of entertainment industry, not to mention you. But after you, there's Mike Myers and Jim Carrey and John Candy and John Candy's wife and
Alice
all
Cooper.
The SCTV guys.
Alice Cooper.
Alice was a big fan. Got a funny story about that whenever you get a second.
Yeah,
so, the documentary, where was I going?
Oh, so Vincent signed on, and now you're talking...
Yeah. So, we were thinking of a working title for the documentary, thanks. Yeah. And I guess we could have gone with the Hilarious House of Frightenstein documentary or the film or something. And our show has got a brand. I mean, we ran around the world for almost half a century now. But I don't kid myself. It's not Campbell's Soup. Yeah. Andy Warhol was not going to do anything about Hilarious House of Frightenstein. Well, maybe he would have. Yeah. So I came up with what I thought was a great idea, because as I'm sure you know, the more film festivals you enter your documentary into, and the more you win, the better chance you have of getting a great sort of Netflix deal or theatrical run or television run or whatever. So here's the name I came up with. In very, very small letters, wherever the title is, it's going to be, in 1971, a small independent TV station in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, wanted to produce a pseudo-horror kids TV show. And then in huge screaming effing letters, it's going to say, and Vincent Price said yes. So human nature being what it is, everybody's going to abbreviate that. And the title will all of a sudden be, and Vincent Price said yes.
Right.
And it's a perfectly innocent use of the name because it's a sentence. It's the whole sentence.
But it's also true.
Yeah.
So it's funny because when I was a kid too, watching it, the Vincent Price factor was enormously impactful because I knew who he was and I liked that sort of thing. But then as the show happened, Vincent wasn't the star of the show. That's what was so interesting about that show, was that it became about all these characters and played by the smallest cast ever. And that was so fascinating to me that all these characters took over our lives.
Yeah.
So when you come back, you said, we're going to shoot it all in 2 days. Did you even know what the show was going to be?
The truth?
Yeah.
No. I mean, we had a concept. And that's all the whole show was built around was the concept.
Then you had Billy at the time?
No.
No Billy Van?
No, actually, Billy was an afterthought. He wasn't our first choice.
Wow.
Our concept at the time, I mean, it was clearly sort of a children's show, albeit it certainly didn't end up that. I mean, it was an equal audience between little kids, stoners, adults. I mean, everybody was getting off on that show.
Every stage of my life, I've done that. I've been in that demographic.
So our concept was that what we would go for, we also knew we didn't have a big budget for writers. Yeah. So our concept was we were going to go for sight gags. And wherever we could, we would do a sight gag. And if you can think back to the old vaudeville days, I mean, everybody likes a pie in the face. Yep. Everybody loves a sight gag. Yep. So the concept was we were going to find the smallest human being on the earth to play the Count, and the biggest human being we could find to play Igor. And then every segment, as soon as you looked at those two, it's a sight gag. You got to break up and start laughing, regardless of what they say. So we started the search. Yeah. We looked all across Canada, believe it or not, and throughout the U.S., spoke to agents everywhere, looking for what's the terminology today, politically correct terminology, is a little person. Yeah. And we wanted a little person that was perfectly formed. We didn't want to make it appear we were making fun of anyone or anything.
That was very conscious not to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we couldn't find anybody in Canada. Yeah. The only person that seemed reasonable in the States, remember Andy Williams? Mm-hmm. He had a weekly sort of cardigan sweater variety show. He had a little person on his show, and we brought him in for an audition. Anyway, it didn't work out for some reason or another. I think he was just too old looking at even at the time. Yeah. So then all of a sudden, the phone rang, and an agent got in touch with us, and he said, I've got a guy. He's from Canada. His name is Guy Big. I don't think he was born with that name, but his name was Guy Big. He's 31 inches tall. Sounds like he's perfect for your use. And we made our first huge mistake on the show. We met him, looked at him, shook hands, and said, you're in. No due diligence, no thinking about this, no working it through, just said you're hired. Yeah. We had already found our Igor, a guy named Fishka Reyes, a South African guy. He'd done a little bit of stand-up.
Big dude.
A little bit. Big dude, 350 pounds.
Big dude.
On a bad day. On a good day, maybe topped that. Yeah. And he had a fairly strong South African accent. And we thought, no 5-year-old's going to know the difference between that and a Transylvanian accent.
That's true.
So, Fishka, you're in.
That's
now,
funny.
The plan was, we were living in my brother and I and his wife and 2 Dobermans and a poodle were living in a mansion in Etobicoke, west side of Toronto at the time.
How'd you get a mansion?
We rented it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, you rented it? Okay.
Yeah.
I think you owned a mansion in Etobicoke.
No, at the time we rented it.
Yeah.
And it was huge. Lots and lots and lots of bedrooms. So we thought this would be perfect we can do the pre-production there and then shoot in Hamilton. So the plan was, I'll call him Igor instead of Fishka Reyes because nobody's going to know what's a Fishka Reyes. So the plan was Igor lived downtown, Guy Big lived downtown, and Igor was driving at the time an old beat-up piece of shit Volkswagen Beetle held together with masking tape. And
that's a big dude in that car.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
There was gray smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe. Anyway, plan was he was going to pick up Guy Big, drive out to the house, and I'd run through their lines with him. Right. So I stood in the living room looking out the window. The house was set back quite dramatically from the sidewalk or from the road. I saw the Volkswagen pull in and the smoke spewing out of the back of the car. He parked the car. Igor squeezed himself out from behind that steering wheel because he was as big as the car. And you almost heard a pop as he got out of the car. Guy Big jumped down to the asphalt driveway because his legs couldn't reach that far. So he was, like that down to the... And they marched up to the front door. And at that point, I was already hysterical laughing because it was such a funny scene to see those two walking together. So they came in, we sat down, I ran through the lines. We did that for 2 or 3 days. I realized already, immediately that Fishka was going to be fine. Igor was going to work out great. Guy Big, different story. I'd give him a nice, simple line like, Igor, get the door. And by the way, he had a voice this big. Yeah. For those of you in Radio Land, I'm holding my forefinger and my thumb together about a 1/4 inch apart. He had a little tiny voice like that. So he did the line like, Igor, get the door. Well, first of all, how do you mic a guy like that? We never even thought of it. I mean, they didn't have transistorized microphones back then. Couldn't use a boom. It'd be in the shot, in Igor's 2-shot. So we figured we'll work our way around that. But he wasn't reading the line right. So we did that for 2 or 3 days, simple lines. And I'd keep coaching him, saying, no, do it like this. Igor, get the door. You got to sound like a count when you're the count. You got to just revert back to your old Dracula days. I gave him, I think, 3 days or 4 days and had a meeting with my brother and said, this is not going to work. We're going to have to get rid of him. He just does not have a funny bone in his body. Yeah. Rest in peace. Nice guy, but he just couldn't cut it, couldn't handle the lead role. Yeah. So we pulled, I keep saying so, I'm going to think of something else. We decided to pull straws and see who was going to lose and had to go and fire him. Yeah. Oh. I'm the younger brother, remember? Right. I lost. I always lost. So we had put him up in a motel around the corner from CHCH in Hamilton. And I made arrangements. By the way, I couldn't find anybody to go with me. Riff certainly wasn't going to go with me. Yeah. Nobody wanted to go with me. But my best friend, we were buddies since we were 15, acquiesced and said, all right, I'll go with you. You got to pay for lunch. So we drove into Hamilton. We went into the bar, and thank God Guy Big was already sitting on a bar stool because nothing worse than starting the meeting by having to pick him up and put him on the bar stool. Right. And I just shot from the hip, and I said, listen, Guy, you're not cutting it. You can't do the lead role. I'm sorry. It's all our fault. We should have done our due diligence. We should have gone through all this before we shook hands with you. So I apologized profusely, and I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you keep the tuxedo we made for you. We're going to pay you what we committed to pay you, and we'll get you a part. We'll give you a part on the show. You just can't do the lead. And he took it like a man, and I ran out of that place and got in my car and flew back to Toronto, heaving a sigh of relief that it all went that well. So then we started a search. And we thought about it. We talked to a couple of people. One of our thoughts was Jack Duffy, who was Captain Jack on our Party Game show, Riff's show. And because he had sort of an interesting look to him. Anyway, eventually we realized, it's one of those, you can't see the forest for the trees. Right. Billy was right in front of our face. Like, he was obviously the funniest thing that ever happened to Party Game. Yeah. It's a very, very fast mind, very sharp, very funny. So we talked to him once, had a short meeting with him, and told him what we were up to. And Billy, I don't know if you knew him or not, but Billy had a voracious appetite for work.
Never met him.
So we were still shooting Party Game at the time, which was a tough schedule. We'd do 5 episodes in a day. So that's a day's worth of work. Anyway, he said yes. That could be the next title for the
He
sequel.
said yes.
Billy Van said yes. So he said yes. And we said yes, and we shook hands and hired him to play the Count, period. Right. But that didn't work out that way, because every time Riff and I came up with an idea for another character, like we had a meeting with Billy once about something altogether different, and we said, we're thinking of doing a DJ on the show as one of the characters. Maybe a guy like a Wolfman Jack kind of guy. Yeah. It's taking a spin on Wolfman Jack and taking a spin on Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Right. So Billy would pull a Rich Little on us, and he would turn around, turn back 10 seconds later, and say, I am the Wolfman. Like he had morphed himself into the Wolfman. Just like that, instantly. There you go. Shook hands. Now he's the Wolfman and the Count. couple of weeks later, maybe a week and a half later, we had an idea for a witch. I mean, what's better? And
have a witch.
For a
so
scary
Griselda
kid.
was your witch, right?
Yeah, Griselda was a witch. We told him we're thinking of doing a witch on the show. And turned around. 10 seconds later, he turns back and said, "Whoa, I think I'm going to put this together with this, together with this." And Griselda was born. And then a funny little segue from the Griselda thing, we had an office, an admin office there as well. And the person that ran the admin office and ran our lives to some extent was a great guy named Norman. And Norman had a Bruce Jenner complex. He wasn't real happy being Norman.
Right.
So he was sort of halfway between being Norman and Norma.
Right. That's amazing. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. And as he was progressing through that, and we loved him, and he loved us.
Loved her.
Yeah. And he was starting to look better every day. I mean, he had great figure, great boobs, great tall and sexy and this and that. So we just dubbed him.
She probably felt better too, right? Becoming her real self.
Absolutely. F&A.
Yeah.
So we just dubbed her at that stage, Norma Jean the Sex Machine, because she was all about being, sexy. And Billy came into the office one day, and we were having a meeting, and she came in, and for some reason, who knows why, she just did one of these, ooh, a real sort of over-the-top, one of those things. And Billy said, "Holy shit, man, that's the way I'm going to play Griselda."
Right.
So Griselda was sort of fashioned after a wonderful, lovely, sweet tranny.
So a transgendered woman becomes the inspiration behind Billy Van's portrayal of Griselda. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Show was so progressive.
Yeah.
Were you and your brother progressive people at the time? Because in the 70s, especially in TV, you know how men were, and men still are. We're learning that way.
Yeah.
But what was the environment like?
I was a hippie.
Yeah.
I had just
you sure were. You were the hippie on the show.
Well, there you go. Well, we needed a filler.
Yeah.
What could be funnier, another sight gag than a skinny little Jewish guy, I weighed about 110 pounds, in a skin-tight Superman costume, wearing a big blonde afro wig.
Yeah.
And Riff and I were both huge Superman fans, the TV Superman, George Reeves. I cried for a week when assuming he committed suicide, assuming that was the fact, when that happened.
So you were a hippie. So you were.
I was a hippie. I just come in off the road. I had done a 3-year tour with Doug Henning. Do you remember Doug?
Of course I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did a show for the Footwear Bureau of Canada to promote Canadian footwear, and Doug and I did a cross-country tour with shows in every major city in the country for 3 years. And I was wearing huge bell-bottom pants and had my own afro. I mean, not like the big blonde one, but like a Jew-fro, if you will.
Okay.
And
I won't, but you will. That's okay.
So I was definitely a hippie. I'd spent some time in L.A., and I had a whole career in the Yorkville Village, which is Toronto's answer to Haight-Ashbury.
That's right.
I had all kind of my Jewish entrepreneurial ventures. I had a magazine there called Funk Magazine, and I had spin art paint machines on the street, so people could put $1 down, make themselves a painting, and take home a souvenir, an artsy craftsy souvenir from the Yorkville Village.
So you were just on the grind. You were hustling the whole time.
Yeah, all kind of great stories there, too, if you want to segue off of the show for a second. I remember there was right at the corner of Yorkville, and I lived on Yorkville as well, Yorkville and Hazelden. There was a club right on the corner called the Minor Bird, owned by Colin Kerr, who also had a Minor Bird shop in the Colonnade right next to my dad's cleaner.
That's a very famous place where a lot of people played.
Listen to the rest of the story. The rest of the story. There was a young kid hanging around on Yorkville back in the days. I mean, there was a million kids, but this guy was there when everybody else went home at 10 or 11 o'clock. He was always hanging around. And he was an African-American, and nice kid. And we buddied up and blah, 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 blah. And he said he wanted to get in the music industry, and he wanted to hang and stay in Toronto. And I just looked at him, gave him 2 looks, and said, "Listen, kid, now I was maybe 18 at the time or something, but I said, listen, kid, in my condescending manner, I think you should go home and come back in a few years if you really want to."
Was home Buffalo?
I'm sorry?
Was home Buffalo? Where was his home?
Yeah, and his name was Ricky James. That's
exactly right. That's why, Buffalo, New York,
I told him to go home. Rick James. No, it gets worse. So he didn't listen to me, obviously.
What, you told him to go home because you didn't think he was ready?
Absolutely. Yeah. He's 15.
He's 15, fair enough.
And lots of drugs in Yorkville and lots of bad action.
So you being protective of him?
Yeah. I was trying.
Yeah.
I was trying to be a Jewish mother. The next story, another kid hanging around the village. This time, a wasp with long, really curly blonde hair, a really sweet kid. And he wanted to get into show business. And somehow, I guess maybe after everybody went home, we went to the Mont Blanc restaurant a lot, which is around the corner on Avenue Road, all-night joint where everybody who sort of lived there and did there hung there. Or maybe it was Webster's up the street on Avenue Road, or the Colonnade was open all night, the restaurant in the Colonnade.
Man, Toronto used to be such a great late-night city. It's not
Absolutely.
It's a great city now, but it's not a late-night city. But back then, it had stuff.
Yeah. So this kid wanted to stay and get in the show business. Gave him the same story. You got to go home, man. You're too young to be hanging around. And I think he listened to me, actually, because he was missing food. Yeah. And then home-cooked food. But he came back a year or two later. He was maybe 15, 16 at the time as well. So he went back. I think he lived just outside of London, Ontario. Want to take a shot on this one?
London, Ontario.
Yeah, it was close to London, Ontario, I think it was.
Wasn't Neil at that time? It was
No, it was Victor Garber.
Oh, Victor Garber, right.
Told him to go home.
Oh, my God.
So, whatever I tell you, George, do the opposite.
Do the opposite.
I mean, Victor is a huge superstar.
What a great actor.
Ricky was a huge superstar and could have still been had he chosen different roads to turn to. Anyway.
So the community. So you take that to this House of Frightenstein, and you... So being progressive was important to you and your brother?
I don't think, to be quite honest, I know it doesn't help the story much, but I don't think it was a conscious thought. No. We had some conscious thoughts. In order to comply with the CRTC's regulations, we had to have a whole bunch of educational content.
Right.
Ergo, Dr. Petvet, the professor. To some degree, we got away with it with Boanna Clyde. The librarian, because he read letters,
it was super
read
creepy.
Stories, I should say.
The librarian was perhaps the scariest part of the show.
That's the one that scared everybody. I do these fan expos and festivals and things on both sides of the border constantly. And I ask everybody, unlike some celebrities who remain nameless, like the one I just spent the weekend with at the London Comic-Con. I won't talk about his name, but he was the star of Star Trek. But they go through people at about the pace of about one per second.
Yeah.
And I like to chat with everybody. I want to find out where they watched and what was their favorite character. And the general consensus is everybody was scared of the librarian. They could watch the librarian. They could listen to the librarian, but they'd hide behind the sofa. They couldn't look at him.
I used to wake my mother up because it was on so early in the morning here when I was watching it.
Global. You were watching reruns.
It was on reruns. Yeah. And my mother said that I refused to miss the show, but I would make her watch it with me because I was too scared to watch it alone, and it was the librarian that was the freakiest part of it.
That's so cool. That was Billy's least favorite character.
Really?
It scared him, and what scared him was he got no sleep the night before we shot librarian segments because he had to be in for makeup at 6.
Right.
That was the single hardest character to do the makeup for.
Right.
Actually, it didn't end up being makeup. It started being makeup. We started with just simple makeup. We realized after shooting for about 2 hours, that wasn't cutting it. We looked like rank amateurs on Halloween. No disrespect intended for you rank amateurs out there enjoying Halloween. Go get it, yeah. Bring your bag to my house. As long as there's something good in it. It's not supposed to work that way? We're supposed to give them something.
Technically, yes. And yes, technically that's the secret.
Right. So... We shifted gears almost immediately to a mask. Yeah. That was even worse. Couldn't articulate his face. It was 120 degrees under there.
Did it become prosthetics? What did I see? Was it?
That was the next step.
Yeah.
That was a whole story unto itself. Can I take a tangent for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. We decided prosthetics were the way to go. Somebody put us on to the heaviest guy in North America for doing prosthetic pieces, Bill Layden, and he was operating out of NBC in New York at the time. So we pulled straws to see who was going to go with Billy because he needed... If I can take a Shep Gordon line and an Alice Cooper line, he needed a Jew to go with him. He needed a manager on the road, right? So we could expedite things and get him down in and out and back.
Because Billy, sometimes, look, I need to be corralled. I totally get it,
Well, I'm not looking for another job right now.
I wasn't.
I'm sure you got your own.
Nor was I necessarily thinking I need a Jew. I understand the concept of being corralled. Yes.
Yeah, no, you got Colton, and he seems to be doing a great job.
Yeah.
Got me here an hour early
Much
today.
to his chagrin,
So Anyway, we pulled straws. I lost. I had to go with Billy. And albeit I do fly, those cross-country tours with Doug, we weren't doing that in the truck. We flew from city to city. But, and I've flown extensively, not my favorite form of transportation.
Right.
Had no choice here. We were getting into production now, heavy-duty production days.
Yeah.
Time was of the essence. So I had to fly from Toronto to New York. Not a big problem. What I thought was going to happen was we were going to land, go outside the airport. There was going to be a guy with a suit on and a hat holding up a sign that said Markowitz or Frightenstein or something, and he was going to drive us to 30 Rock. Well, it didn't work out that way. My brother had made other arrangements and neglected to mention it to me. But the arrangements were we were going to go from the airport to 30 Rock by helicopter.
What?
Now, if you think about that and take that to the next logical step, I got on. It was against my better judgment, and it was the second helicopter ride that I had. The first one was also my brother, another little trick. I'll get back to that later if you like. Anyway, got to New York,
right?
And where did you land in Times Square?
Yeah. So wait, where did the helicopter pick you up?
At the airport.
At the airport. Would you like you flew into Kennedy and?
Yeah, and then the airport was there waiting. The helicopter, sorry. Now, but that's an easy one.
Yeah.
The tough one is where do you land in Times Square? Now, can you figure that out?
I just figured they would land on the building.
Yeah.
On the roof.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
now if you don't like flying
that's mental.
In airplanes, you're going to like flying in a helicopter even less because you're flying in a plastic bubble.
Dude, I will race a motorcycle at 250 kilometers an hour. I will go out of my way to avoid a fucking helicopter.
Yeah.
I have no interest in that.
Well,
because they go down.
Then it's even worse having to land. You see them coming down a landing on the roof. So anyway, we got out of the helicopter. Luckily, I brought a change of pants because I needed one, and we went downstairs. They did the molds for the how the prosthetics work. They make a mold of your face, and then we left right away back to the airport and came home. A couple of weeks later, they sent us all the prosthetic pieces for all of the characters. So all of those are applied individually: the cheeks, the wrinkles, the nose, everything.
How does you work for a network now? They'll kill you over a cab chit. How does a local, small budget show in Hamilton, Ontario, do that? How does Riff get you a helicopter? Well, and to even get that makeup artist?
Well, they don't. They didn't.
Right.
They weren't quite at that level of sophistication.
That was all you cats doing that.
Yeah.
So you foot the bill on all this.
Yeah. Well, that was the deal. The deal was with them. We charged them what we charged them. I think it was $500,000, which was a ton of money back in those days, especially for our little independent station that nobody watched.
And they gave you $500,000.
Sponsors. But the deal was they also supplied the below the line. As you know, that means they supplied the studio, the crew, the lighting, all that stuff. We supplied the above the line, which were like the sets, the actors, the writers, all that stuff.
You had $500,000 to make 130 hours, and they covered all the below the line costs.
Yeah. Now, had this been a sort of traditional production, that would have taken about 3.5 years to do 130 episodes at the pace that a normal production goes.
Right.
And had we not broken all the rules, because the way television worked back then was, if you were going to do an hour-long episode, you'd shoot an hour-long episode.
Correct, yeah.
And then you'd put it in the can, shoot another hour. That's the way you do it. That would have taken about 4.5 years. So we sort of broke the rules at that point, and I'm sure we're one of the only TV shows out there who shot in a modular fashion. As a matter of fact, there was a full-page story in Broadcaster magazine in 1971 that featured the story about Riff and I and the show and explaining how we would shot it. Like the way we did that was we'd go in one day and do, let's say, a dozen or 15 librarians. The next day we'd go out and shoot like a dozen or 15 Griseldas. And then at the end of shooting all that, we had an executive assistant named Nancy Pruss, and at the end of that, Nancy got locked into a room with an editor. The room was about the size of this room, but yours has got windows everywhere you look. The editing room has no windows.
Yeah, they're really
no clock,
wild spaces.
no nothing, almost no air. And she was responsible for, it's like shuffling a deck. You know, you take a librarian, a Griselda, two super hippies, and mix it all together, and you've got an episode. That was all done in post.
How long
and I
did
think
you
when
shoot
she was
that?
finished, by the way,
I
think she committed herself to an insane asylum.
you watching all that footage for sure.
It made her crazy. It's making anybody crazy. Sorry.
How long did you shoot? Like, how long was
the whole process was 9 months.
So in 9 months, you shot 130 hours.
Yes.
Wow.
And that included pre and post.
Oh my God, that's a really crazy undertaking.
Well, but again, we did it the only way it could have been handled. When it came to the writers, by the way, there were no real writers. Because as you know, in a deal like that, when you get paid a fee, if you will, the more corners you can cut and the more expeditiously you can do the production, the more you get to keep at the end. I mean, whatever is left on the table is yours. So rather than go to the CBC and hire their best writers, because they had the best writers in the country.
For sure.
And I'm not saying that because you're affiliated. It's just they are what they are.
Yeah, they were making Canadian shows.
That was the corporation.
Yeah.
Or going to New York or going to Los Angeles. We went to Ryerson and asked the professor there at the Radio and TV Arts course, who are your top 10 people, because we want to hire them, the top 10 graduating class.
Right.
So he gave us the names, and these were all kids that were dying to get out of school and get into show business. So they were prepared to work for 50 cents an hour. Now, we paid them a little more than that, but just having a job, being able to have a credit, was like a life thing.
Did any of those kids go on to do other things?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, they did. They were almost all kids from Ryerson. There were a couple of pros, and they didn't want their names attached to it because it was beneath their level to think they were associated with this.
Right.
I remember there was one who passed away this year, so you may know who he is, but he had a radio show for a long, long time, a kind of sci-fi kind of radio show. And he did an interview once, and he said that he thought working for us doing this show was like working in I think he put a meat factory, I think. He said a sausage factory or something. That all we want to do was crank out as much product in a day as possible. Well, fucking hey. I mean, that's the business we were in.
Yeah, for sure.
He just didn't realize what he was signing on for, I guess.
So let's fast forward to the end of this series. When you're sitting back with Vincent Price, did he like what he saw?
He loved what he saw.
Yeah.
And he was a really easy guy. I mean, he was a prince amongst men.
I've read that he was a lovely person to work with.
Terrific guy. I'll tell you how great he was. I've done lots of shows, worked with lots of celebrities, and by and large, my experience has been when the celebrities come onto a set, whether it's a movie set, I did a movie a couple of years ago with Vanessa Redgrave, whether it's a movie set or a television set, they come on, maybe they buddy up with the other members of the cast. By and large, they're oblivious to the fact that there's a crew out there.
Right.
Vincent walked onto the set, walked over, introduced himself to each and every person in the crew, stood there while somebody took a photograph of him. So they'd all end up with the memory and a photograph of the two of them together that would be with them for the rest of their lives.
Right.
After he went through that process, he said he wanted to go away for 15 or 20 minutes. We assigned a driver to him. Driver took him out, came back 20 minutes later. He'd gone to the beer store and came back with 2 cases of 24 packs of beer and sat down and had a beer with the guys.
Amazing.
I mean, nothing, I'm sure, ever in their lives that they could compare to sitting there and having a beer with Vincent Price after having their photo taken with him.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, a terrific guy.
What was Billy like?
Billy was incredible.
Billy Van is like this. I think that, never having met him, but as a cat on the outside, but who's in this business now, when people talk about the great performers that this country has turned out, people don't mention Billy in the way that they ought to. He did so much, had such an impact, was so versatile, was so funny.
Hallelujah.
You know, and people don't give him the love. And I guess I get it, you know, because maybe that's a testament to how good he was, because he did character so well.
Well, that's true. That's true. You know, the people who I'm involved in the documentary with and other people I've known over the past years, they're all like, it's in unison. We sob at the fact that Billy was never given a Walk of Fame star here. No, that kind of recognition.
I think you know, the guys who do the Walk of Fame, the men and women who do it, they need to do it posthumously. Yeah. Billy Van needs to have his name, and people need to walk by and Google that guy's name.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Ghoulish Gary, the guy who did he designed the T-shirts that I usually wear, and he designed the poster that I'm going to leave you with, and the pins that I was wearing today. When he was going through university, he used Hilarious House of Frightenstein for his thesis, and he designed HHOF postage stamps.
Amazing.
And they were absolutely incredible. He submitted them to Canada Post, and I don't even think he ever got a response, which would have been at least dignify the submission.
Okay, let's go through some of these songs, because we're going to play songs in the show, and you sent a list. And I know I had spoken to Alice Cooper about it in the past. Cooper was obviously a big fan of this program.
Got time for one quickie?
I want to tell stories about these artists. Yeah, talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alice, I was appearing at the Fan Expo in Toronto a couple of years ago, and a little aside to this, by the way, I used to be in the rock and roll industry in the mid-'60s. I managed a few bands, and one of the bands, when the band finally disbanded and sort of decided to look for a day job or something, the guys all broke up and went their own ways. They ended up getting their just for desserts, just not when I was managing them.
Yeah.
The bass player and the drummer went on to play with Alice for a couple of years, and then Lou Reed for a couple of years. So I have a couple of connections with Alice. Anyway, I'm at Fan Expo. I'm sitting there. Now, I never have 1,000 people standing in front of me at a time waiting for an autograph. I'm not William Shatner, and I'm not Hasselhoff, especially since my part on the show was a cameo.
Yeah.
And without a Superman costume and a big blonde afro, I don't think I'm easily recognizable. But I always have people standing in line, maybe 4, 6, 8 at a time. I looked up, and all of a sudden, there were 100 people standing in front of me. And I was so taken aback, I said, what the fuck are you guys all doing here at the same time? Well, how did this happen? They said, you know, at those big fan expos and things, they have breakout rooms where we do panel discussions. So they said we were upstairs at Alice Cooper's panel discussion. And going at one point or another in the panel, he told the audience that Hilarious House of Frightenstein was his all-time favorite television show. So as soon as he was finished, they all raced downstairs to get a poster and autograph from me. So there's Alice Cooper for you.
What song should we play?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know, the ones I gave. I love all the ones I gave you.
The Prince of Darkness is the one.
I go back a long way. The Monster Mash was always kind of cool for me, and I thought that might be fun.
I just read this Twitter trend, which is amazing, which is we never actually heard the Monster Mash. We've only ever heard people singing about the Monster Mash, and they were talking about the people in the Monster Mash, but no one's ever fucking heard the Monster Mash. What is the Monster Mash song? We know the song about it, which is the hit.
Yeah.
But what is the Monster Mash? What would it sound like to you? They did the mash. They did the Monster Mash.
That's
what
it.
the fuck's the Monster Mash?
Well, there's your answer.
But what does it sound like? They didn't do it.
What do you mean they didn't?
Well, the song, they're just singing about the guys doing the Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash.
Yeah, well, it's like monsters, like like today's zombies, if you will, or ghouls walking.
Just walking?
I was the Grand Marshal at the Kitchener Zombie Walk last year,
That's
a couple
awesome.
years ago. Yeah, so it was the same thing. I mean, everybody dragging down the street, and it was monsters in a graveyard.
Let's talk about zombies. My top 3 zombies. My number 1 zombie is the George Romero zombie. My number 2 zombie is the Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later zombie. My 3rd favorite zombie is Rob Zombie. And White Zombie was an enormously impactful band to a lot of people. They embodied the horror culture as well. And Rob was a fan, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, loved the show.
Yeah.
Loved the show, yeah. And Halloween is such a special time, It really is, especially in my heart. I'm heartbroken. The fact that we moved about 10 years ago to Thornhill, just north of Toronto, and they're all big fancy schmancy houses, set back from the sidewalk, and they're kind of spread apart relative to being downtown, where you hipsters live.
That's right.
And so
we call ourselves working people, but whatever you want. Yeah.
So it's no, I already said as soon as I found your pad, man, I said I want one of these.
It's pretty dope. But kids don't. Yeah, I know.
It's hard to go from one house to the next. You can hit a different kind of community and get to 20 houses at the same time. We take you to cover 4.
Yeah.
So we don't get any traffic at Halloween. It's so sad.
Have you met Rob Zombie?
I haven't, but Todd, the fellow that's producing the Frightenstein albums, knows him. Took him an episode of the show. When he went back to pick it up, he said, "What is this fucking show? I love it. I love it."
I think a lot of what Rob Zombie does as a filmmaker is the scarier version of the Frightenstein. It has the same vibe. Or let's talk about The Who. We have Boris the Spider on this list.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about that song.
Yeah. Oh, I just love it. It just takes me back. The Who take me back. I envision myself sometimes doing one of those and strumming the guitar and spinning my arm around.
The Pete Townsend windmill. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a sort of wannabe rocker. You can tell by the way I dress.
That's all good.
And so I love the band. I love that guitar man. And if I was Ronnie Hawkins, I'd stand next to him right now and do one of these fanning his acts as he plays.
That's amazing. What was the scariest part of the show for you?
Frightenstein?
Yeah.
I'll give you a better lead in. Why don't you ask me what was your favorite? What was the best part of the show?
What's the best part
you
of the
must
show?
have loved it. There was no good part in the show. No, it was the hardest job I've ever had in my entire life, before then and since then. Cramming that, 130-hour-long episodes into that short a period of time was like an enormous, good choice of words, enormous, crazy task. Now, the best part has been the 46 years, almost half a century since, because I get to revel in the show and the glory and talk to fans and people like you who grew up watching the show and loved what you saw. So there was no real favorite time in the show. I mean, it was all horrible. Yeah. Even taping my segments, the super hippie things. You've been on a million television sets. You know how much lighting there is. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if you've ever worn a wig for 12 hours. I have. Yeah, it's horrible.
I've worn a Superman suit, but never on camera. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Between that and the wig and the makeup and the lights, there was not a pretty picture involved with that show. The best part, I'm sorry, I guess there was the best part. Best part was meeting and sort of living with, if you will, for 3.5 or 4 days, Vincent Price. Yeah. Unquestionably, that was the best part.
Did you ever get freaked out watching it? Did the librarian creep you out?
No. Creeped me out having to go and fire a guy big.
Yeah, that's hardcore.
That was the real down part.
Okay, the other songs you picked were Season of the Witch by Donovan.
Love that song.
Excellent, too.
Love that track. That was a great one.
And I Put a Spell on You, Screaming Jay Hawkins. Why that one?
That goes back a long way, too.
Yeah.
And I go back a long way. I mean, the band, one of the bands that I managed was originally called the Rogues, evolved into being the Five Rogues, then the Mandela, and ended up as Bush. Yeah. And
Was it Dominic Troiano's band?
Yeah. Donnie, yeah.
Rest in peace to Dominic.
Yeah, honest to God. Yeah, Donnie and I were like best like this. And I love that guy.
He's the reason why when Bush, the big international band from England, broke, in Canada they had to be known as Bush X. Yeah. Because Dominic and you guys had the head Bush.
Yeah. I mean, we finally gave up the name and got him to make, I think it was a $15,000 or $20,000 donation to a charity of our choice. Because at that point, it was this close to being over. Yeah. Anyway, the guys disbanded. Donnie went on to replace Joe Walsh, as I'm sure you know, in the Eagles.
That's right.
And not in the Eagles. Joe left
Joe's
to go
band,
to the Eagles. He was in James Gang, and he stayed with them for a couple of years. Then he went on to replace Randy in the Guess Who. So
he could play, man.
And then television scored 1 million shows. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you coming in. Let's just wrap on this though. What is the next step? You have an animated idea, you have a documentary.
Yeah.
But what about let's make the show again?
A reboot.
Let's reboot the show. It's going to be really hard because there's no Billy Van. And
no, and you know what? I said no about 1 million times. I said I didn't want to talk about it because I've been asked 1 million times, have you ever thought about doing it again? How would you do it again? I kept saying I couldn't. There was no way I could replace Billy Van. There's no way to replace Vincent Price. I had one guy who was so fucking persistent. He kept banging away and banging through the whole interview. Yeah, but if hypothetically, if you ever did it again. Yeah. So I meant just to get rid of this son of a bitch, I just thought, okay, I'll give you an answer. The only way we could have ever done it again, the only guy I could think of who was as funny as Billy and as fast as Billy, who could have done it, would be maybe Robin Williams. And 2 weeks later, Robin was gone.
Listen, I think we do it with Rob Zombie as the host and Jim Carrey plays Billy Van, and we just make 10 episodes. We make 10 episodes, and we have Jim Carrey can play all those characters. 10 episodes.
With his eyes closed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll shoot it in 1 month, not 9 months.
And who did you say would be the host?
Rob Zombie.
You know what? I had thought of Alice to replace Vincent.
Alice
I hadn't even thought of Rob.
Yeah, Alice is a bigger star in terms of for legacy.
Yeah.
But Rob would direct an episode. I mean, listen, it's your business, you're a company, but I'm just thinking, I look at it and I think, a reboot for Netflix, let's make it with Jim Carrey. We could probably get him to do it, dude. We could probably get him. You could get him to do it without me. You don't need me. This is for you. But I think that I think a generation needs to see these shows again, and especially with technology. Yeah, you could really.
Well, I've got some great ideas that you can do with technology, like the Count be running out of goulars, and he's got to raise some money, so he decides he's going to open a used car lot, and with animation you could do this.
Yes,
actually, where a guy would see the sign, pull up, and say, "I'm looking for a car." What kind of car are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for a big car. Igor, bring around the big car. So Igor would come back dragging this big round crushed round car. And he said, no, Igor, not a round car. Bring around the large car. So he brings it around. It's a hearse. And Griselda could say, I can contribute to this. Woo! I think I'll open a cafe. And she'd open up a cafe, and everybody who would come up and order something, she'd put it in front of him, and he would vomit or spit it up or, whatever, get sick. But there's lots you could do with either live action and my other thought was for the live action was the original Count creates a time machine. And, he was such a screw-up. All we got was hash and scriggle and scraggle and stuff on the screen. And we could do that without too much trouble through the miracle of modern technology. And I get somebody else to voice while Billy's doing what he's doing. And his great-great-great-great-grandchildren, the guy from the reboot, would also create a screwed-up time machine, and we could cut back and forth to the old show to the new show with all the segments.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love that. Where are the old episodes? I watched parts of them on YouTube.
Well, they're close by. I have them in the trunk of the car, and I'm
Can you release them all?
What do you mean?
Like, to buy them? Are they all? Because I can't find them all in the most.
No, you can't. But I'm in conversations right now with a company that I'm sort of this close to making a deal. Cool. That doesn't mean I wouldn't entertain new ideas and a new body involved. And that would include perhaps a YouTube channel and a streaming thing and a box set, maybe a couple of box sets. Lots going to happen on the wonderful world of Frightenstein over the next year or so.
I am so grateful that you came in here, and I'm so thankful for what you and your brother and Billy and that whole crew did in that 9-month plan, because it's one of the greatest things I think this country's ever accomplished in media.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. And I got to tell you, and this is not just to make you feel good or anything, but you didn't even have to do any homework. Like, you've got it all in your head, man, and in your heart.
Yeah, and Colton and I talked about it for sure, but I'm telling you, I grew up on this show, but more importantly, the impact. I've thought a lot about the impact of the show. And a lot of us talk to each other about it.
Yeah, that's great. And the luxury of not having to squeeze all this into 4 minutes, which is the most I generally get on a radio station or a TV interview or whatever. Like, this was an absolute dream interview, I got to tell you that. Good to finally meet you, because I've been a fan of yours for years.
I appreciate it. The guy who said, the down-to-earth guy at CHCH, who said, okay, here's the money. What did he think of the show when you presented, like, the first episode to him?
Oh, he loved it.
Yeah.
Because his station was producing the wrestling and news and local stuff, and I mean, this was way beyond his expectations. I mean, even when he'd walk through the set every once in a while, just proud of owning this whole thing, and he'd look at the set and he'd say, "Oh my God! Like, did we do all of this? Did our guys do this?" No, Sid, we did this outside and brought it all in, but he was. And when he got to meet Vincent Price,
oh my God,
yeah, and he'd stroll down every once in a while when we were shooting a different character, and he'd say, "Hi, I'm Sid Bibby, the general manager," and Billy would say, "Yeah, I know, it's me, same guy who was here yesterday, same guy who was here last week," because every day he'd be in a different character.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mitch.
My pleasure, man.
Appreciate it, bud. That was great.